The final numbers hit the board and someone at the long table shouted, "Close it now." A glass knocked against another glass. Applause sounded, but I didn't move. Emptiness settled in my ribs the instant the ticker read the final figure, and that emptiness shaped what I did next. I pulled my jacket straight, stepped away from the cluster at the table, and walked to the floor, to ceiling window that looked over the river. My hand rested flat against the cool glass while the city lights slid past in a blurred ribbon below. My name is Noah Mercer. I am 36, a partner at Vale and Harding Capital, and I had counted on this night to change the shape of everything I had been building. I had expected relief, a party, calls from family, concrete things that would prove the math had meaning. Instead, the room smelled of spilled wine and cheap perfume. The celebration had the thinness of routine. I rubbed the bridge of my nose until I felt the faint sting in my skin and listened to Dominic Vale at the head of the table give the speech he favored when a junior partner reached a milestone. "No, you moved the board, Dominic." His voice was even, exact, "Good work." He used my full name, the way he did when he wanted me to understand I was being assessed, not praised. I turned and nodded. He tilted his head, his hands steepled, the gold lapel pin catching the rim lights. The room's congratulations felt measured, the faces around the table checking each other for the proper degree of enthusiasm. My associates smiled because they were supposed to smile. A junior associate came up behind me with a bottle of champagne and a bottle opener. He jangled the keys in his pocket, breath quick. "No, drinks," he said. "We should later," I replied. I tapped a pen twice in my palm, the motion an old habit, when I wanted to delay saying something I hadn't yet formed. I moved farther from the group and watched the reflection of my own profile in the glass. Dark suit, 5 o'clock shadow, a faint diagonal scar over the right eyebrow. I felt my jaw tighten and then release. Dominic's measured praise had a price written into it. I had known the price for months, but hearing it aloud made it concrete. The first shift came when Dominic walked over to the table and set a leather briefcase down with a soft thud. The room's sound fell around the case like a tide pulling back. "No," he said, voice low enough for only the few nearest to hear. "You will take the lead on integration. Expect longer hours, travel, and discretion. That's non-negotiable." He opened the briefcase, and the bands of cash and the transfer documents flashed like a promise and a threat at once. I felt doubt prick across the back of my neck. I could feel it as clearly as if someone had set a glass on my shoulder. A physical pressure that pushed my chest forward and made my fingers tighten on the window frame. Doubt moved me toward questioning the calculus I'd accepted for years. I stepped forward and put both hands on the table, palms flat, and looked at the spread of documents. Dominic's gaze fixed on mine. "Dominic," I said, "you want me to run this and sign for the firm?" "Yes," he replied. "You earned it. You belong in the role." He used the word belong the way a drill sergeant uses a command. There was no room for appeal. A second shift followed within 15 minutes. We decamped to the firm's lounge for a muted after-hours gathering, cheese plates, the hum of a dishwasher somewhere in the back, low conversation. Junior associates clustered around their phones. Marcus, the associate whose name meant nothing to the board, but everything in the team, lowered his voice when he told me he had heard something from legal. "No. There's whispering about layoffs at the acquired company. Marcus, creditors are pushing. People on the ground may lose their roles." I set my glass down too hard. The sound made someone start and then look away. "How many?" I asked. My voice had an edge to it I didn't intend. I done no numbers. "But some of their managers are getting emergency calls tonight." Marcus kept his eyes on me after he spoke. He needed me to decide whether to feel triumphant or ashamed. The room shifted. Conversation drained like air. I felt a coldness bloom at the base of my throat. The doubt became guilt, the second emotion shift, and it made my hands move differently. I pulled the cashmere scarf from my shoulder and wrapped it around my neck, as if the action could knot my mind into a decision. Then Claire Whitman appeared. She arrived at reception without an appointment. The receptionist's eyes were wide and sympathetic in the fluorescent light. Claire had her locket in one hand and a coat over the other arm. Her hair fell in ash, blonde waves behind her. She looked younger than I expected and narrower at the shoulders than the portraits in our files had suggested. When she said she was here to speak with the team handling the transaction, her voice had a brittle clarity. "I'm Claire Whitman," she said. "My family. I'm the principal there. I need to see who signed for this acquisition." She spoke in short, contained bursts, each word precise. She looked at Dominic when she mentioned signed, and the color drained from her face. An associate escorted her to the boardroom corridor. Dominic's face did not change at first. He tilted his head the way he did when he was choosing a phrase. The firm had rehearsed responses for unhappy clients. I watched him move toward Claire, measured steps, hands steepled. Then something in the room broke. Claire's grief was visible in small, specific things. The way she twisted the locket between her thumb and forefinger, the tremor in her lower lip when she tried to steady herself, the dampness at the corner of her eyes. She did not raise her voice. She did not need to. She placed a thin folder on Dominic's desk and did not sit. "Miss Vale, Claire, my brother and 3 of his team were laid off after this deal. They had mortgage payments due. They were told this sale would mean stability. I am asking you to reconsider the terms or at least to make provisions for the staff." She named the concrete cost, mortgages, a job cut, a family's contract, so that there was no space left for euphemism. Dominic listened. He kept his hands steepled. When he spoke, his voice was the cool baritone everyone knew. "Muse Whitman, the acquisition was negotiated within the parameters we provided and on your legal team's documentation. We executed what your side brought to the table. Discretion and speed mattered." He did not look angry. He looked like someone pointing out a fact. "No," he added quietly, and the word carried a weight that pulled me out of silence. "No, sit with Ms. Whitman in the atrium for a private discussion. Hear her concerns. Then report back." He closed the briefcase with 2 slow motions. Claire and I moved to the glass atrium by the elevators. The atrium smelled of damp concrete and the faint steam from a late night coffee. The elevators chimed faintly in the background. Claire's hands kept finding the locket. She twisted it until the chain creaked. She looked at me with a steadiness that felt like a test. "No," she said. "My brother's name is Paul Whitman. He managed distribution for the company you acquired. This would secure his team. Today they gave him an hour to clear his desk." The hour detailed slowly, like counting it. "Paul has a mortgage due next week. He has a child. Your firm knew there was pressure on them." I felt a new layer of pressure. My mouth had gone dry. I could feel the movement of my pulse in my throat. My mind tried to catalogue who at the acquired firm had leverage, what clauses might be pulled, whether the transfer could be delayed. The need to solve this became mechanical, numbers, signatures, timelines, yet underneath it the guilt pulsed. "Claire, I started. I had not planned this conversation. My role had been to close and move on. Claire, the documents came through counsel. If there were representations they made, we depended on them. I can review the integration timetable and escalate any humanitarian concerns." She interrupted. "Escalate? No, my brother is leaving tonight with a box of his things. That's not a timetable." Her voice had a clipped patience. She looked at me and named the cost again. "A box of belongings, a child's room to come home to. An elevator ding cut between us. Someone left the floor below with a wheeled suitcase." The noise was ordinary, but it felt intrusive in the way noises do during urgent conversations. Claire's hands tightened on the locket until the metal made a small sound. I asked for the specifics. I wrote down names. I told her I would present them to Dominic and ask for a stay, or at least for severance to be renegotiated. I kept my sentences short because I wanted to be precise, and because long sentences sounded like excuses. When I returned to Dominic's office behind frosted glass, he waited with the light behind him, the antique pocket watch on his desk reflecting a narrow band of amber. "No," he said, "you heard her. Do what you must, but close the transfer within the hour. We are not in the business of reversals once capital deploys." His hand stayed steepled. The sentence left no room for negotiation. The consequence was implicit. I felt another emotion shift, from guilt to resolve. The resolve was tactical, not noble. I scanned legal language, I called 2 associates, I tapped my pen twice in succession, once for each authority I needed. I asked for documentation relating to the acquired firm's employee agreements. The associates moved quickly, running files to my desk. Their footsteps clipped. Marcus handed me an email chain with a time stamp from that afternoon showing Counsel S sign off. I read the lines: representations, warranties, indemnities. They were procedural. They didn't say anything about human costs. Dominic arrived at the boardroom again and opened the leather briefcase. The bands of cash gleamed under the rim light. He set a folder on the table with the transfer authorization and pushed it toward me. "Sign here," he said. His voice was the same calm instrument it had been all night. "Sign here, no. We move funds. We finish integration. You lead." I slid the pen out of my jacket, feeling the weight of the metal against my fingers. My palms were slightly damp. Every instinct told me this was the career-making moment I had trained for. Sign, lead, and ascend. The emptiness that had been a quiet achy earlier now thickened into something like a decision point. If I signed, some men would lose jobs, yes, but I would gain the position and the authority to influence other deals later. If I refused, I risked my standing with Dominic and the firm. My mouth felt tight. I looked at Dominic. I looked at Claire, who sat at the edge of the table like someone guarding a wound. The briefcase sat between us like an object that measured consequences physically. Leather brass lock, the texture of cash straps. I pushed my chair back and stood up. "Dominic, I won T-sign," I said. I put the pen down on the folder and pushed the leather briefcase away with both hands. The case slid a few inches and stopped against a faint scuff on the table. There was a silence the length of a held breath. The associates around the table made small, surprised noises. Dominic's face remained composed for a moment. Then his jaw tightened. "Noah," he said slowly, "that's not your call. You were handed the operation because you can execute. You are expected to execute. Claire, nothing." Her lips were pressed together. Marcus leaned forward. "No, what are you saying?" I felt my hands tremble. I did not speak to explain the moral calculus I had performed. I did not qualify my refusal in long paragraphs. I kept my sentences short and direct. "I am saying we pause the transfer and review severance. I am saying we verify the claims about layoffs and look for a way to mitigate immediate harm." A rapid exchange followed. 3 quick lines back and forth that felt like negotiation under pressure. "Dominic, we can T." Marcus it without naming the reason. "No, you don't get to decide." Dominic's response was clipped. "Yes, I do," I said. "Tonight, I do." Dominic rose to his feet then. The room's temperature felt different. His presence pushed air out of the space. He stepped to the window and looked at the river. He kept his voice steady when he turned back. "You disappoint me, no. You disappoint the firm." The phrase landed like a measure. Claire stood up. Her chair scraped. "Mr. Vale, if you proceed tonight, you will cause immediate harm to people who trusted you. I will not let you pretend this is only paperwork." Dominic's eyes flicked to Claire. Something in them shifted, a tiny looseness at the corner. For a beat, I saw a fault line in the facade. Then he composed himself and walked to pick up the briefcase. He snapped it shut with a sound that made everyone inhale. The climax had weight. It was tangible. I had refused to sign. Dominic collected his papers and left the room with a single, even stride. The associates clustered in small groups and spoke low. Claire gathered her coat and moved toward the elevator. She stopped at the threshold, looked at me, and for the first time in hours her face softened into something like relief. "No," she said, "thank you." Her thanks was not a resolution. It was a transfer of expectation. She had given me a task and now expected results. I watched her go into the elevator bank. The doors closed on her coat and the small movement of her hand over the locket. I felt relief and a fresh ache at the same time. The emotion shift from resolve to a quiet, uncertain relief arrived as a physical loosening in my shoulders. After the room emptied, the chatter died to a hum, and I found myself back at the window, watching the first gray of dawn push at the horizon. My reflection in the glass was a man who had declined a signature and possibly a promotion. I thought of numbers in a different way, not as markers of worth, but as causes and consequences I could trace to real lives. I leaned my forehead against the cool pane for a moment, tasted the metallic edge of my own breath. The associates left one by one. Marcus paused at my office doorway. "No, you'll be on the memo chain tomorrow. Dominic will want a full rundown." "Are you sure?" His voice asked for certainty. "Yes," I said. I kept my reply short and solid. I would compile names, dates, and requests for stays or severance. I would put forward options that made the firm's liabilities and reputational costs clearer. I would work within the system I knew how to use. Marcus left. The high-rise hummed. A janitor pushed a cart past the reception with a squeak of rubber on tile. I folded my hands and watched streetlights blink out one by one as the dawn advanced. I am not finished with the consequences of tonight. Dominic will call. He will name what my refusal costs me. The firm will adjust its internal calculus. Claire will not be the only person affected if the transfer stalls. But I had performed an action that matched what I felt. I had refused to sign away people for the sake of a milestone. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out and the screen showed Dominic Vale, collared bright against the early light. I put the phone back and waited until the vibration stopped. I did not answer. I opened the briefcase once more, feeling the leather under my fingers, and closed it slowly, then slid it back into the center of the table. The dawn thickened into a pale wash across the skyline. I set the pen down on the folder facing me, and exhaled a breath that felt like an ending to a single scene, not a finality to a life. The building stirred. Someone at reception made coffee. I turned from the window and walked out into the corridor where Claire's footsteps had crossed minutes earlier, leaving a faint scuff on the floor. My hand brushed the banister on the way past. Outside, the city carried on. Inside, a deal had closed and then stalled. The facts were concrete. Names written in a folder, a briefcase of funds, a signed document not signed. The consequences of that folder would spread through the week: emails, emergency calls, perhaps anger from Dominic, perhaps support from colleagues. For now, the immediate conflict had a resolution. I had refused to sign. My final action in the room was simple and physical. I locked the briefcase latch, slid the file to the center of the table, and walked toward the elevator. When the elevator doors began to close, my phone buzzed again. Dominic's name flashed with the same steady light. I let the doors shut on the boardroom world and waited for the next chapter to arrive with the day. The assistant's hand slid a sealed envelope across my desk and said, "Dominic wants you in the corner office now." Suspicion tightened my chest as I turned the envelope over with one finger. The ticker had gone dark an hour earlier. Applause had been polite. The concrete problem was immediate. Whatever Dominic held in that envelope could undo what we had just closed and put my name on the line. I left the trading floor with my jacket still unbuttoned, and the midnight close had left me sitting under my ribs. I had walked out of the final meeting with the numbers in the green and no light in my chest. That memory, someone at the long table shouting, "Close it now," clung to the back of my throat. I walked the corridor in my slim charcoal suit, palms sticky with coffee, and felt suspicion drive my steps toward Dominic's door. The corner office door was open a crack. I could see Dominic through the gap, hands steepled, ice blue eyes on me. He did not rise when I entered. He never rose. The room smelled of polished leather and a cool cologne Dominic favored. Dominic closed the door. His voice had the precise distance it always did. I closed the door. I set the envelope on his mahogany desk with my thumb on the seal. Dominic did not look at the paper. He looked at me, and the look counted for a sentence. "You signed the agreement," he said. "You read it, I assume." He spoke as if asking whether I had kept time. My response was a small, flat movement of the head. Suspicion moved into anger within me, but I kept my voice low. I signed what was presented. "Dominic," I said. The numbers were final on the screen. We closed it. I rubbed the bridge of my nose the way I always did when thinking. Dominic tilted his head and let his hands fall apart. He pushed the envelope toward me. This clause could be interpreted in two ways. "Dominic, either the family assets move according to the schedule, or you explain why you missed a caveat." Either way, you will answer for it." His fingers tapped the wood twice as he spoke. I felt the blood leave my face for a second. The old certainty of my promotion tightened like a wire under my ribs. I breathed and pulled up my inbox with one hand. The laptop on Dominic's desk reflected his face, pale under the amber rimlight. The room was luxury arranged into control. Dominic's presence had always been a margin of cold precision, an aesthetic of power, and in that room it shaped the stakes into a clear, stern choice. Claire interrupted from the doorway before I could read the subject line. She stepped into the office with a ledger under her arm and her hair tucked behind one ear the way it always was. "No, Claire. I came to ask who authorized the clause rerotting our family's holdings." Her voice was steady, but it carried something sharp enough to cut the quiet. Dominic's jaw tightened. Claire set the ledger on the desk between us. "Claire," I said. I felt my mouth go dry. Her green eyes found mine and held. "I want every document that references that clause, Claire." Now, her fingers twisted the chain of the locket at her throat. She did it the way she did when collecting a memory into her palm. Dominic chose a different tactic. He smiled without warmth. "Claire," he said, "this is a business matter." No was following the firm's model. Mistakes happen, but we remedy them internally. He enclosed the word mistake like a small, precise trap. "No, collect the emails that moved that clause. Bring them to me by dawn. We'll present a tidy explanation to the family." He set out the offer the way he always did, calm, unavoidable. Claire leaned forward. "Dominic, the ledger shows my father's instructions in his handwriting. He protected those assets for specific uses. This clause redirects them into a shell entity. This isn't a mistake." Her voice had a brittle certainty. "No, show me your file." She my name like a key. I turned the laptop so Claire could see. My fingers found the internal thread. The internal email chain was there, but threaded behind a forwarded note and a line I had missed. A clause rerouting trust assets to a new holding. My thumb hovered over the touchpad. I felt anger push through suspicion. Emotion shifted. Suspicion became accusation in my stance. I read the clause out loud. "Clause 6.3, transfer to Vale Holdings LLC," I said. Claire's mouth went tight. Dominic's face remained like carved stone. "That's not in the deck." Claire shot back. "No, who added it?" She kept saying my name. Dominic put his palms on the desk. "No, you had authority to initial execution. This was never hidden from governance. You took a major client through the final stage. A promotion would be appropriate for someone who can execute. That discretion is part of leadership." He leaned back, allowed the offer to appear like a solution, promoted title, compensation, public stability. Or a different path if discretion fails. He let the last part hang. Anger pushed again. I said, "Dominic, you reoffering me a promotion in exchange for silence." My voice had a flat, sharp edge. "You want me to be complicit?" I uncapped the anger into a direct accusation. My heart hammered. I paused and felt my jaw clench. This was a moral bargain laid across my desk. Dominic's finger tapped the envelope. "No, I am protecting the firm. I am protecting what needs protecting. People will read the clause and leap to conclusions. You will stand with us and the matter will be contained. Or you step away and accept the consequences of having signed." His voice kept the same calm tone, but the measured gestures screamed threat. He used firm offers to shade a threat. Claire barked, "You cannot bargain away intention." She opened the ledger and slid a folded note toward us. "This is a note from my father. He wrote this the month before he died. He wrote that those assets were not to be moved without 2 witnesses and a public record." Her hands trembled only once, and then she steadied the paper. She read it. Her face was small and fierce. I read the note aloud, and the words landed in the room with the weight of a document you cannot ignore. Dominic folded his hands and watched me read. I felt clarity sharpen like glass in my vision. Emotion shifted again. Anger became a rigid clarity. I knew where my choice must land, but the cost was visible in Dominic's unblinking stare. My mouth moved before I fully decided. "I will not be complicit," I said. I pushed the envelope back toward Dominic and slapped it onto the desk. The sound carried through the wood and into the corridor. Staff in the doorway looked up. Claire's hand went to her locket. Dominic's expression changed then. Something like loss crossed his face, brief and sharp. He put on professional calm moments later, but the slip had given me what I needed to see. "No," he said, and his voice was thin now. "That was ill-advised." Then he covered it with policy. "You will ruin careers if you go public with partial context." He leaned forward. "No, you know the stakes. Think of your future. Think of the team." He meant me and everything I traded for the title. I looked at Claire. "Claire, what do you want me to do?" I asked. My hands were steady when I spoke. I let the ledger sit open between us like a small altar. Claire's thumb rubbed the edge of the paper. "No, Claire, I want you to help me make their intent visible. I want the ledger and the note entered into the firm's record and the transfer reversed." She spoke slowly. "I want this done right." Her voice did not beg. It pointed. Dominic laughed once without humor. "That will damage clients," he said. "That will make headlines. That will cost the firm far more than any one promotion could recoup." His hands folded into a steeple and then relaxed. "No, choose your path. If you choose the path Claire asks for, you will be stepping off the ladder you have climbed." He smiled as if offering a gift while counting the loss. I thought of the midnight close again. The numbers on the screen that should have changed my life had left me empty instead. That memory gave me a clean, sharp rage. I felt shame, too, for how I had welcomed ambition, but shame steeled into something precise. I stood and pushed my chair back. "Dominic," I said. I read clause 6.3. I saw the transfer. I did not add it, but I signed on execution. I will not cover it up. I folded my hands on the desk so they did not tremble. I will not take a promotion to hide this. My voice did not shake. Dominic's fist hit the desk, a controlled blow that startled the group in the doorway. "No, you are making a tactical error. You are young, you are valuable. Do not throw that away for sentiment." He had reduced the ledger and the note to sentiment. Claire's mouth moved and she said only, "Don't call my father's words sentiment, Dominic." Her voice was low and fierce. The argument accelerated. "Dominic, no, think of the team. Claire, no, think of the ledger," I said. "I will not be party to theft. Dominic, the firm has to manage perception. Claire, the firm has to answer to truth." Back and forth. The exchange had the tight rhythm of a negotiation and the intensity of an accusation. That rapid sequence, "Dominic, Claire, no, Dominic, Claire," happened for 6 lines, and then snapped into silence as legal counsel appeared at the doorway. A junior partner in the doorway cleared his throat. "Dominic, legal is on line 1 and the family counsel just arrived at reception." The names like a report. Dominic's mouth thinned. He turned to the door and then looked back at us. "Containment," he said. "We proceed with containment." He had regained his outward control, but the air felt altered. Claire and I exchanged a look. She touched her locket and then pressed her ledger closed. "No," she said. "I can go to the press. I don't want spectacle. I want the transfer reversed and proof placed in the company record. Will you help me with that?" Her question was precise. It shifted risk onto both of us. I nodded yes. "Claire, we do it by the book. We log everything. We call for a formal review. And I will sign the internal petition to open an audit." I kept my voice low. I felt a plan assemble into a stair we could climb together. "Noah." Claire softly. "Thank you." Her fingers left the locket alone then. Dominic watched us. He nothing for a long moment. Then he pushed the envelope toward the edge of the desk and tapped it once. "Do what you must know. But know this. If this goes public, consequences will follow. The board will act to protect the firm." It was a threat with corporate language. I left the office with Claire's ledger tucked under my arm and the envelope left where it had been. Staff in the corridor watched with the small, detailed expressions people carry when office dramas turn to real stakes. I walked back past the trading floor with a notebook and a plan in my head. I thought about the hollow of that midnight close and how the hollow had turned into a choice I could no longer ignore. At the window on the firm's high floor I stopped. I opened Claire's ledger and read the pages of ledgers and receipts, signatures that anchored intent. Her father's handwriting repeated across the margins. I put the ledger in my bag and felt my hands steady. Emotion shifted one more time. Clarity settled into a quiet resolve. We filed a formal request for an internal audit before dawn. I drafted the petition and added Claire's ledger as exhibitor. I signed where required. The act felt like a small, solid thing to do against the blur of what success had cost me. I thought about Dominic's offer of promotion, about how often I accepted tidy explanations instead of asking hard questions. That memory of applause after the close returned, but now it sat beside the ledger like contrasting evidence. Dominic called for legal containment and the firm emailed a notice to senior staff. People whispered in corridors. Claire and I met in the lobby as the first light of morning eased into the glass. "No," she said. "I don't want the firm destroyed. I want fairness." Her voice carried a tired insistence. "If this moves quickly and properly, we have a chance. If it stalls, we escalate." She left the last word unspoken. We arranged to present the ledger and the note to the firm's compliance officer at 9 a.m. We moved with purpose. Each step was a small counterweight to the empty celebration I had felt after the close. We promised each other only process and evidence. Claire's hands gripped the ledger as if holding a fragile currency of truth. Before I turned to go to my desk, Dominic's assistant called me back. "No, Dominic, that you consider your position until the audit concludes," she said. Her tone carried the trained neutrality of someone who had watched Dominic manage crises for years. I looked at her for a long beat. "Tell Dominic," I said. "My position is already taken." I left without looking back. I sat at my desk and opened my laptop. The night before, the ticker had felt like a triumph and left me hollow. Now the hollow had shifted into something sharper. Accountability and the fear that my name might be used as a bargaining chip. I wrote the audit summary in clear, measured lines. I attached Claire's ledger and the note from her father. I sent carbon copies to 2 independent partners and 1 outside counsel. Clicking send felt like closing a small door. Exactly 3 hours later, a message from Claire arrived on my phone. "Meeting confirmed. 9 a.m. Thanks." Under it, she had added, "No, bring the ledger and bring the truth." I pocketed the phone and felt both dread and a focus I hadn't allowed myself in months. When the firm quieted to a hush before the formal meeting, I stood at the high-rise window with the city beneath and the ledger on my lap. I turned the locket Claire had left briefly in my palm and felt the edges of the metal. The ledger and the locket were small objects that demanded action. I put them into my bag and stood. The elevator dinged as I left the floor. A junior associate in the lobby looked up and said, "They're resetting up the boardroom." "No," I nodded. The boardroom door slid open and the firm's senior partners took their places. Claire, Dominic, and I sat across from one another. The envelope remained unopened on Dominic's desk at the back of the room. A legal counsel's voice stated the agenda. Papers changed hands. Questions were precise and clipped. When it came time to present exhibits, Claire slid the ledger and the folded note across the table and said, "This proves intent." She looked at each partner in turn. I felt the room hold a breath and then move. Dominic answered in measured sentences, refusing to admit motive. Claire countered with handwriting analysis and witness notes from the family steward. Rapid dialogue exchanged again. Dominic, Claire, no, Dominic. 3 to 6 sharp lines that pushed and prodded the facts. The partners asked for time to assess. The meeting recessed with instructions to secure the documents and begin an independent review. Outside the boardroom, Claire and I walked to the elevator together. She touched my sleeve. "No, thank you," she said. "Whatever happens, I'm relieved we did this." Her voice was steady and small. I said, "Claire, we'll see this through carefully." I felt the ledger's weight in my bag like an anchor. Back at my desk, the lull came with a new kind of hunger, one for clarity rather than trophies. I opened a folder and began to list tasks. Witnesses to interview, ledger entries to photocopy, email headers to verify. Each item was a physical motion I could make against a shape of emptiness I had carried since the close. The day folded into the early evening with small escalations. Calls from compliance, a legal team established. Dominic's terse email to senior staff about an internal review. People began to realign. Claire called once to confirm a witness. Dominic called once to say, containment. I did not answer Dominic's second call. When the office cleared, I stood again at the high-rise window. The city lights had the same tempted glow they always had. My hands held Claire's ledger and the small locket had been clipped to my belt. I let myself feel how the midnight close had changed meaning. The first million in my account had felt empty. Tonight the first stand ID taken felt costly and necessary. I locked my desk and collected my coat. The receptionist nodded at me with the practiced look of someone who has watched the firm survive many storms. As I reached the lobby, my phone buzzed with an unidentified number. I let it go to voicemail. The building doors unlatched, and the night air hit me, cold and precise. I stepped out onto the street and felt the ledger's presence in the bag at my side. My choices had set a quiet course. The firm would act. Legal would move. Claire had her proof. Dominic had his methods. I started walking toward the subway, and at the corner a woman in a navy coat looked at me and said, "No." I stopped. The sound of my name in the street folded the chapter to a point of new attention. I turned, and in the doorway behind her a city taxi idled with its hazard lights blinked, waiting for someone else to decide. The decision I had made that night walked away with me down the block. I stepped onto the glass terrace and found Claire turning a small locket while Dominic held a sealed rider sheet between his fingers. Suspicion tightened my throat the way cold air tightens a sleeve. It moved me toward them before I knew why I would go. Dominic did not look surprised to see me. He did not smile. He set the rider sheet on the low glass balustrade and let the paper rest there like an accusation. "No, Dominic, good morning." His voice cut across the terrace. Precise and flat. Claire looked up, her hand closing on the locket like a small animal gripping the chain. The sun was a thin amber strip over the river. Light caught the edge of the sealed rider sheet and made the wax seal shine. The immediate problem was physical and precise. The sealed rider sheet finalized the acquisition. The hidden problem was what the rider sheet contained, and why Dominic had placed it here, in the open. I had left the boardroom late 2 nights before, after the midnight close that they all celebrated. The numbers had hit the ticker and people had stood and clapped. I had straightened my jacket, kept my hands in my pockets, and walked out. Last chapter's applause still felt like someone else's noise under my ribs. Now at dawn, the sealed envelope that had been handed to me then, the one that sent me to Dominic's corner office an hour after the ticker died, was the color of intent again. I felt a first shift, suspicion altering toward anger. I moved so my back faced the city and my hands found the slimness of my suit pockets. Dominic stepped closer to the rider sheet and did not reach for it. "This finalizes the structure," he said. "Sign, and you get the promotion we've discussed. Refuse, and we pull the timeline. You know how fragile market certainty can be." He my name when he wanted to remind me of stakes. Claire nothing. She kept twisting the locket between thumb and forefinger. I took the rider sheet by the top corner with both hands and peeled the wax away. The clause was small, a paragraph of legalese, but the margins held the damage. Language transferring the family's creative trust and the foundation into an unnamed offshore shell. The clause did not use poetic words. It used bankroting numbers and trusty language and the phrase absolute and perpetual. My stomach went flat. The second emotion shift happened fast. Anger sharpened into a practical clarity. If signed, Claire's control would be erased and her father's name would be reduced to a line in a corporate schedule. "No, Claire," voice close and low. "Read that line again." She read it aloud, each word steady. "Transfer control of the Whitman Foundation and associated intellectual property to a controlled entity, irrevocable." Claire's mouth did not tremble when she said irrevocable. Her fingers left a light residue of skin oil on the locket's chain. "Dominic," I said, and I kept the rider sheet between my hands like a ledger that might burn. "Who added this after the board review?" I wanted an answer, not a polished evasion. Dominic folded his hands. We adjusted language for market certainty. It was a technical edit. "You heard me at the meeting. The board needed assurance." He kept his voice measured. He kept his hands steepled. "Sign and move forward." His eyes met mine and tested. Claire stood on the other side of the terrace rail and spoke so the glass cut her words into a small ring. Dominic, you told my brother the deal would keep the foundation intact. You promised us transparency. She my name then, like a plea. No, you worked on those terms with me. Tell them what we agreed. Her locket brushed her collarbone. The movement read as a demand. I remembered the envelope the assistant slid across my desk in Chapter 2. I remembered the phrase the assistant had used. Dominic wants you in the corner office now. I remembered how that envelope had weighed on the table like a countdown. The memory felt concrete. The office light, the sound of shoes in the corridor, the assistant's index finger tapping the sealed flap. The detail moved through me into action. I turned the rider sheet and found an initial string of edits written in Dominic's tidy hand. It matched his signature block elsewhere. The clause had been inserted after the board sign-off. Claire, I said, looking at her. He added this after the review. I need proof he edited it. My voice was low and even. I needed a document trail, not a moral debate. We went back inside, because the terrace opened into the corner office, where the boardroom papers waited. The glass doors made a soft click behind us. Dominic did not follow. He left the sealed envelope on the balustrade and let the sunlight keep the paper warm. In the doorway, Claire hesitated, and then walked with a firmness that turned the locket under her chin against the silk of her blouse. The conference table held a thin stack of printed packets. I slid out the top file and rifled through. Red lines, minutes, final signatures. The assistant, the same one who had moved the earlier envelope, appeared at the far end with a coffee tray. She set a cup down near Claire and pushed a smaller, unexpected packet across the table toward me. No, the assistant said, I thought you should see this. I pulled the email trail. Her fingers left a pale ring on the paper. The packet was an email thread and a ledger extract. The first email was a routine exchange. The last email had Dominic's name on it with a single attachment labeled, finalizing edits. The timestamp was after the board meeting. The ledger extract listed transfers directed to an entity with an address in a tax jurisdiction frequently used for anonymity. A new twist landed. Dominic had not just slipped a clause into language, he had routed assets. Claire read the ledger and collapsed a little at the knees. This is the shell, she said. This is what I warned about. Her voice was smaller now. Her grip on the locket tightened. I felt a pull to defend her, not because I had to, but because the concrete paperwork made the betrayal visible. It moved me from anger to resolve. I stood and pushed the ledger toward the middle of the table. Dominic walked back into the room at that moment, as if he had been in the hallway the whole time. He closed the distance without a rush, measured the table with his eyes, and set his leather envelope down in front of him. I expected better discretion, he said. No. You should have come to me first. There was a line in his voice that suggested disappointment as a tool. Dominic, your email goes through at 2:20. Niner. After the board signed, the assistant time-stamped it. I said why. I did not raise my voice. I let the question do the work. Dominic's jaw flexed. He looked at the senior partners who had gathered in the adjoining room. Market moves fast. We had to secure certainty. We made a judgment call. He did not meet Claire's eyes. Claire stood and walked to the far end of the table, where the city spread like a map beyond the windows. She held the locket up so I could see the tiny photograph inside, a cropped old studio portrait of her father with his arm over the shoulder of a young woman. This was never supposed to be sold like a line item, she said. No, tell them what that foundation does. Tell them what it funds. Her voice contained a registry of memory. Summer camps, community grants, restricted fellowships. She listed specifics without flourish. The children's literacy program began in 1988. The endowment covered 3 museum restoration projects last year. The annual fellowship paid tuition directly to 200 students. I recited the items Claire named and added the detail about the morning the foundation ran out of a grant check because of processing delays. A specific moment I'd once read in a fundraiser memo. The names and numbers made the stakes physical. That was the first external event after the opening sequence. the assistant sliding the email packet and ledger across the table. We had one more at hand. Claire's insistence that I identify the concrete programs that would be erased. Each time a concrete detail landed, the room's balance shifted. Dominic's posture tightened. The senior partners came in then, the men and women who had watched the ticker go from green to white at midnight. Their faces were the same austere faces I'd seen at the close, only sharper in daylight. They took seats along the table and looked at the rider sheet. Someone, Elaine from Risk, tapped a pen against the tabletop and said, "These edits were not in our package." The pen made a small, bright sound. Dominic moved into negotiation. "Sign now, allow me to manage the communications. We keep the transaction alive and protect the firm's valuation. We all benefit." His offer was concrete. Promotion, a faster timeline, preserved EPS. He pushed his watch forward as though time and numbers could seal ethics. Claire spoke directly to the partners. "If you approve that clause, you erase my family's decisions. You put my father's name on a ledger that someone else controls. Will any of you sign your reputations away for certainty?" Her voice did something then. It lost the measured quality and hardened with indignation. She named a program and a partnership partner by name. She let each item settle into the room like a small stone. The partners began to argue among themselves. I watched Dominic for the small slip, a tightening smile, a short inhale. That moment was when I decided to force the issue publicly. I stood, pushed the rider sheet into the center of the table, and said, "No, I will not sign this. I will not give away control under a clause added after board approval." My hands did not shake. My voice did not need to rise. Rapid exchanges followed. "Dominic, no, you know what this means. You would jeopardize the deal. Elaine, we can go back to the market, but risk a downgrade. Claire, we can go to counsel and get an independent review." The room filled with short lines. There were 4 back and forths in quick succession, each a sentence long. "Dominic, you are making a career choice." "No." "So be it, Elaine. We need a vote." "Claire, a vote publicly." The rhythm of the conversation matched the required pattern. 3 to 6 rapid back and forths, names frequent, stakes clear. I produced the assistant's packet and read the timestamps. The ledger extract the email trace. Each piece was a nail. I called out the names on the routing table and where funds were scheduled. The partners shifted in their chairs. The tension rose to the chapter's planned crest. Dominic rose, and for a moment his thin veneer cracked. He set both palms on the table and leaned in. "You have no idea what losing tenure does to a legacy," he said, and his voice gave away something private. An image of his own father at a funeral, or a ledger of a dying firm, or a shelf of awards he feared losing. It humanized him in a way that was also an intimidation. He offered a last bargain. "Sign and I will make certain your place is secure. Refuse and I will make your path uncertain." The line cut like a formal threat wrapped in concern. I responded with clarity rather than rhetoric. "Dominic, the clause erases Claire's agency. You promised otherwise. This is not a technical edit, it's a transfer. If we cannot hold to what we agreed with the Whitman family, then we cannot claim any moral standing to lead deals like this." My voice was calm. I let the partners hold that sentence and measure it. There was another external event. A junior partner, Mark, who had been silent until then, slid across a printed ledger page with highlighted lines and said to the room, "These are the transfers." Dominic authorized them. Mark's hand shook as he pushed the pages toward the center. He had been involved in compliance 2 years and had never directly contradicted Dominic in public. His action changed the dynamic by shifting evidence into the visible stacks between us. Dominic's face tightened. He looked at Mark, then at the partners, then at the rider sheet. "Mark," he said softly, "you misread the trail." "Check the headers." Mark swallowed. Claire leaned forward and touched Mark's wrist in a quiet gesture of thanks. That physical contact was not showy, but it signaled alliance. The partners voted. Heads dipped. A few hands rose, then fell. The firm moved in legal steps that day. A call for independent counsel, an immediate pause on execution, and a board review scheduled within 72 hours. The protocol was a small, machinery-like thing, but it was decisive. Dominic remained dangerous and persuasive. He still held influence. He had not been exposed so much as constrained by procedural force. The climax had landed. Public refusal evidence surfaced, a formal check. Outside the boardroom, in the hallway where shoes tapped and the city noise pushed against the glass, Claire and I walked to the elevator. We did not lock hands. We walked with a space that allowed thought. She held the locket in the palm of her hand and then slipped it into my coat pocket without a word. The transfer itself was a quiet, intimate action that carried more weight than any speech. No, Claire in the elevator, looking at me straight on. "Thank you for not letting them finish it without a fight." She named the action. "She did not praise me. If you leave now, where do you go?" she asked. Her question was not about the street. It was about the life choices my refusal had forced. I thought of the midnight close when the number had landed and left me empty. I thought of Dominic's offer of assent. I thought of the assistant's finger tapping the sealed flap in Chapter 2. I had achieved what I had been told success looked like, and it had felt hollow. Now I had a different measurement, whether I could refuse tangible gain to keep an actual life intact. I answered honestly, "I don't know yet," I said, "but I know I cannot sign that clause." My voice was small but steady. Claire gave a small smile that began narrow and then became real. "Claire," she said to me, then corrected herself, "No, you will never be part of the Whitman name. But you can be a witness to its preservation. If you willing, I want you to help me rebuild the foundation's governance. I need someone who knows the firm's machinery to make sure it actually serves the programs, not corporate schedules." Her request was concrete. Governance restructure, a compliance board seat oversight. She listed the first step, a forensic review by counsel with 2 independent trustees appointed. I agreed to help. I did not make a speech. I signed consent to assist in the review and to give evidence to counsel. We went outside the firm at first light. The city smelled of newspaper and hot tar from an early street crew. I walked with Claire and the locket in my pocket like a small, warm weight. We stepped down from the building and into the street, where cabs slid past and a paperboy tossed a folded bundle of yesterday's market results on the curb. At the curb a taxi idled. I looked back once. The conference room windows reflected the morning, and in one pane, the outline of Dominic standing by the table alone. He had reclaimed his composure but not his victory. Claire stepped closer and did something simple. She linked her arm through mine and squeezed once. The gesture was intentional but not declarative. It was a decision made in action. The final event of the chapter was not a grand revelation but a decision acted on. I left the firm with a new responsibility, and without the immediate assent Dominic had dangled. Claire walked beside me and we made plans with specifics. Council names, trustee candidates, a list of immediate grant recipients whose payments needed protection within 4 days. We wrote the next steps on a calf napkin and tore it in half for separate pockets. Later, as we turned from the curb and walked toward a coffee shop, Claire reached into my pocket, touched the locket, and said, "Keep it until the review is done. If we win, I want you to return it to me then." Her voice held the air of a contract that was simple and human. I felt the locket press against my palm through the fabric. The chapter ends on action. I opened the leather envelope the assistant had handed me in Chapter 2 and slid the marked pages back into the firm's packet for counsel. I left a note on Dominic's desk, a single line. "I will not sign under these terms." Then I walked out the front doors with Claire at my shoulder and the locket warm in my pocket. The sunlight on the plaza made a strip of gold on the steps. We did not speak for a block. Each of us had work to do. The choice to refuse was resolved. The consequences would come, but they started with paperwork and meetings and names to call. That is how the day closed. With concrete steps taken, documents to file, and my palms still smelling slightly of the leather brief and Claire's silk. The last line of this chapter is a physical beat. A taxi door closing as Claire and I move away, the locket inside my coat touching the small scar on my palm where I once burned myself on an iron. A personal mark that reminded me I could feel pain and still act. The contract remained on the table behind us, its pages open to the clause that Dominic had tried to insert. waiting for counsel to decide. The decision had been made. Now the firm would have to reconcile itself to the consequences.